Look, let's talk a bit about teacher training, because I guess the question is, teachers need to be equipped well to deliver education that will stick in kids' heads. What can we do about teacher training to ensure that they have the right skills in the classroom to do that? Marianne.
I thought you were going to go to Steph, because she's part of the solution here. One of the stories that stood out to me was, I wrote a piece on teacher training last year, and as I was finishing it up, came across a story out of Australia. The director of a bunch of schools there that had 1,500 teachers saw what was lacking in initial teacher education, especially around teaching teachers how the mind works, how memory and learning works. And psychology, especially over the last few decades, has come a long way in understanding how short-term memory and long-term memory and working memory function, and that can really inform how you teach a classroom. So what he did was he sent all 1,500 of his teachers who were experienced and trained back to get further training in those areas in classroom management. And before he did that, 42% of his students were underperforming in reading. 3 years later, which included retraining the teachers, 4% were underperforming. So equipping teachers to know how to teach well is not happening in all of our teacher institutions. And Steph is a bit of an expert on this because you've actually audited what they're being taught. But it's not happening. They could be equipped better, and those that are do teach better.
So Steph, how could they be equipped better?
I think there's two key facets that come to mind. I mean, again, the backdrop is this kind of idea of knowledge that we have, so that's really integral to all of it. But the two things that really come to mind, first of all, are being more equipped to deal with the realities of the classroom as they actually exist. So there's a lot of talking about different kinds of theories that go on in our university-based system, but when they're getting into the classroom, there are an enormous proportion of student teachers who are moving into becoming beginning teachers not knowing actually how to handle the realities. So like I talked to a beginning teacher last week who said to me, marking writing books. I've never marked a writing book before. You know, so that, and it's bread and butter stuff for teachers, but they're just not being taught how to actually do those things through the training that they're doing. They need more time in classroom. They need more time learning about behaviour management strategies, how to get a really calm working environment happening in a classroom. That practical stuff, the really practical bread and butter stuff. The other aspect is what Marianne was just talking about, which is insights from the science of learning. That we've really collected an amazing sort of set of knowledge of the science of learning over the last 30 or 40 years. There's a lot that we know about it that we're just not utilising in teacher training at all. So part of the report that Tim mentioned in the very generous introduction was we went through, my wonderful colleague Michael and I went through all of the university-based courses of the teacher training options that are available in New Zealand at the moment, and we looked at the science of learning and how many of them actually contain that content versus other things. And we found that the science of learning, we looked at 222 courses and 2 of them made mention of the science of learning. So it's less than half of 1% of the papers available in our teacher training at the moment through the university-based system are teaching the science of learning. And we didn't expect it to, you know, we had a hunch that it wasn't what it should be, but it was quite shocking to actually see those numbers of how it's almost completely absent. So that's the other strand.
And also, we talk about classroom management. Melissa, you mentioned something during the break about the number of kids who come into a classroom in a particular situation. Do you want to just unpack that? So this is what we need. This is the situation, and how would we go some way to ameliorating that?
Last week I had a school, somebody in a school, I should say, a secondary school, contact me and say that from their starting this year, Year 9 cohort of children, over 50% came with a diagnosis. This was at quite a run-of-the-mill school, neither high decile nor low decile, and quite a standard part of New Zealand in terms of, regular kind of suburb and so on. Now that's a problem. I teach into some of the initial teacher education program, and I have my students complaining to me last year, a group of them, that in their entire degree, they had one behaviour paper in their degree on how to handle behaviour. Now, Steph and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago that you have a finite number of points in a degree, right? And you have to work out how to best spend those points to get the best trained teachers possible. Now, we have in some of our institutions, teacher trainees doing papers on neoliberalism in New Zealand education. Now, of course, you can imagine they get one version of what neoliberalism is, right? It's not a balanced viewpoint at all. They obviously do a lot of treaty papers and te reo Māori, and now I'm not for a second saying that those things aren't valuable. Like what I am saying, how do we best spend those points to get the best trained teachers possible?